Work moves fast. Every email, report, and proposal counts. That's where Grammarly comes in. It's your one place to think, write, and finish. Grammarly's AI agents help you find natural phrasing, fine-tune tone, and confidently write wherever you work. It's the premier writing tool that 93% of users trust to get more work done. In a world of generic AI, don't sound like everyone else. With Grammarly, you never will. Download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com.
Craving the coffee flavor you love, but without the caffeine? Kachava's got you covered with their newest coffee flavor. This all-in-one nutrition shake delivers bold, authentic flavor, crafted from premium decaffeinated Brazilian beans. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, and so much more. Treat yourself to the flavor and nutrition your body craves. Go to Kachava.com and use code NEWS. New customers get 15% off their first order. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
Between the signal and the noise, aiming for advancement on trade with the Trump administration. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Going beyond the headlines.
Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Looking for a breakthrough on trade. She might be the most powerful person in Ottawa that few have ever heard of. Janice Charette has been the country's top civil servant, serving twice as clerk of the Privy Council. For 5 years, she was Canada's High Commissioner to the UK. During her career in government, she led no fewer than 8 departments. These days, she is Canada's chief trade negotiator to the United States, appointed to that role by Prime Minister Mark Carney. So when Janice Charette speaks about trade and tariffs and dealing with the Trump administration, people listen. She was at an event this week in Ottawa and was asked how things are going with CUSMA, the free trade deal with the United States and Mexico. She called it a deal that's the envy of the world and one worth saving.
The U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement is a good agreement. It is an agreement that brings benefits to businesses, to employers, to workers and families and communities in the United States, in Mexico, and in Canada. It's really the framework that underpins this marketplace, which is the envy of the world. And it's just a few numbers. You know, the North American market, 506 million consumers with a combined GDP of $42 trillion. Canada is the #1 customer of the United States. In fact, 39 million Canadians buy more goods from the United States than 2.8 billion people from the combination of Japan, the UK, and China together.
While the free trade deal might have a lot going for it, there's no question the Trump administration wants more from Canada. One need only listen to recent comments from the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, who questioned the Prime Minister's plan for closer relations with China and hoping for a better deal with the U.S. after midterm elections in November.
Good for them. That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world. Okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
Back in Ottawa, our top negotiator, Janice Charette, downplayed those comments from Howard Lutnick. She said there's signal and then there's noise, but also admitted things won't be status quo.
My focus in all of this, despite the noise that's out there, is absolutely kind of clear-eyed, the relentless pursuit of the best trade arrangement for Canada, for Canadian employers and workers and families. And that includes reducing any barriers to trade that might exist between Canada and the United States. United States has raised what they describe as irritants. We need to take those conversations head on. We are taking those head on and retain the best terms of trade. And at the same time, as we're doing that, the Government of Canada, as you see, is investing in the capacity of businesses to help to go through the turbulence that we're experiencing right now in our trading relationship, trying to get rid of barriers to trade in the country, trying to expand our alliances with trusted trading partners around the world. But for me, this is an and, not an or. We have to maintain our best relationship with our best client. We have to invest in building trade links within Canada, and we have to open up to the rest of the world.
This week, Prime Minister Mark Carney revived a trade advisory group from the Trudeau years. It's called the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations. Notable members this time around include a former Harper-era cabinet minister, Lisa Raitt, and also the former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Erin O'Toole. This was the Prime Minister.
I'm very pleased to have that group. It's a diverse group, leaders from the union movement, experts in industry, and CEOs in finance and across the economy.
The current leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, was asked what he thought of a former leader of his party being part of this new advisory group. Poilievre doesn't seem to have any issues with the makeup of the group, but said what Canadians really want to see is action from the Prime Minister on trade with the United States.
It's great. At the end of the day, though, what we need is action. Mark Carney was elected on the singular promise that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. Since that time, American tariffs have doubled and broadened on Canadian goods. Carney's given us the worst economy in the G7, the only shrinking economy in the G7. We're hemorrhaging jobs. Just 10 days ago, the Americans hit us with much bigger tariffs on products that include Canadian steel. And what has Mark Carney done, really, in a year on this? He hasn't held negotiations in 5 months. The Mexicans are going to be at the table formally with the Americans any day. The only talks that Mark Carney is doing are YouTube videos where he's comparing himself to Sir Isaac Brock and holding up little figurines in his office. So he told all of you the other day that with his new majority he was going to stop showboating. And then a few days later, he put out a showboating YouTube video, right? The 2.6 million Canadians whose jobs depend on getting rid of these terrible American tariffs have had about enough of Mark Carney making false promises and delivering the worst economy in the G7.
The top person in the Carney cabinet on trade is Dominic LeBlanc. He said this new group will have its first meeting next week.
The new council, we're very excited about the new advisory council. The Prime Minister has brought together senior business leaders in the country, senior elected union leaders, representatives of business associations, former premiers, former leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. It's very much focused on businesses that obviously have important relations with American customers, American business partners. I'm looking forward to the first meeting next week. I have spoken to a number of these people over the last number of days. This will be a forum for the Government of Canada to hear directly from business leaders, elected union leaders, and community leaders. I think it'll help our negotiations and it'll help the Government of Canada be informed in terms of these different perspectives.
The CUSMA deadline that everyone has marked on their calendar in Ottawa these days is July 1st. That is the commitment to review deadline. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
I've often described the Privy Council office as the top of the government food chain in Ottawa. It is the Prime Minister's department, after all. And the head of the Privy Council is the clerk of the Privy Council. And that person is always the top bureaucrat in the entire federal government. So the Privy Council has enormous influence. It has a very large staff of almost 1,200 employees toiling away in the office towers of downtown Ottawa. And yet it seems it's also fond of outsourcing a lot of work. According to a new report from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, hi, Franco. A lot of this spending, and I mean, it's some $17 million in government spending, it falls under the category of professional services. What did you find out?
Yeah, so professional services, folks, it's a broad category, but essentially just means consultants and contractors and outsourcing. And, there's some waste in the records for sure, but the big picture to me that stuck out is that you have the Privy Council office spending millions on staff and then millions on consultants to do a similar job, if not the very same job that taxpayers are already paying their staff to do, right? And one example that sticks out to me is just the money spent on comms, marketing, research consultants, okay? So the Privy Council office spends almost $6 million on these communications, marketing, research consultants, even though it's spending about $40 million annually on 320 staff that are employed to do the same job or a very similar role. So it also just kind of paints a picture of what is going on in Ottawa, where taxpayers are paying an arm and a leg for the growing bureaucracy to do a job. And then we're also paying a whole bunch of money to consultants to essentially check their homework.
So by your estimate then, how much of this work that is being outsourced could be done in-house?
Yeah, I think quite a bit of money, right? We mentioned PCO spending about $40 million on staff to do one thing, then dropping about $6 million on consultants to do a very similar thing. Now, maybe the government might make this argument that there's a couple firms out there, they have expertise, only they can do it, but that doesn't explain the general trend. And, what we've seen in Ottawa over the last 10 years in the Privy Council office, but also in other departments, is that taxpayers are paying an arm and a leg for both the bureaucracy and the cost of these consultants and contractors, right? So over 10 years, we've seen the cost of consultants and contractors double. And at the very same time, we've seen the cost of the bureaucracy itself, right? The government's own employees go up 80%. So it just doesn't make sense to me that we're spending more money for the in-house bureaucracy, and then we're also spending way more money for the outside help.
So Franco Terrazzano is with us. He's the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I have to ask you about a few of the expenditures here. For example, how much are Canadian taxpayers paying for yoga lessons? First of all, and what the heck is a productivity ninja?
Yeah, those are great questions. So in the Privy Council office alone, they dropped just under $13,000 in 1 year on a yoga teacher. Now, I have no idea why you have government employees needing a yoga teacher. A funny other things in this is that they actually hired a yoga teacher that's about 2 hours away from Ottawa, despite just having so many local options, even some free online classes that we were able to dig up. In the same breath, too, the government also spent about $1,300 on what is self-described as a, quote, productivity ninja. Now, I've got a way for the government to save money. You probably don't need to spend $1,300 on a productivity ninja if you're not doing yoga during work hours.
Yeah. And how much on limousines? $20,000 or so?
Limos, yeah, about $20,000 on limos. You have more than $4,000 on artwork in a year. And again, just one federal department. They dropped another $4,000 on a supplier of products like coins and swords. Hopefully maybe one of those swords will help those bureaucrats slice through the debt, but, I'm not going to hold my breath. Hundreds of thousands of dollars also spent on furniture, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on an upscale hotel in Toronto. So, yeah, these records, they detail a whole bunch of government employees seemingly looking for ways to spend more of taxpayers' money.
Yeah. I'm in the wrong line of work. I should have been a productivity ninja. Yeah.
There you go.
So, Franco, hang on the line. When we come back, I want to ask you about a few other things. Alto, high-speed rail project, Alto, and gas taxes as well, with gas prices down across the country, which is good news. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio
A few more minutes with Franco Terrazzano, the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We have seen, Franco, gas prices drop across the country since the federal government suspended the federal excise tax on gasoline and diesel. That will be in effect until Labor Day, September 7th. What did you think of that decision, Franco?
Well, I'll say the Canadian tax time we've been pushing the government in Ottawa and across Canada to cut gas taxes. So I think this temporary gas tax, while it'll be going back up in a couple of months, at least for the next few months, it's going to be saving people money. I know I'm in Ottawa. I fueled up on Monday. Definitely saved some money at the pumps there. However, I will say the government still has more work to do, right? This is just a temporary tax cut, meaning just after Labor Day, the government plans to crank that tax right back up. You still have a number of other federal taxes, provincial taxes at the pump that we're paying for. So while it's good to see some gas tax relief, I will say what we're currently doing is pushing the Carney government to make it permanent and also pushing provincial governments to follow the lead and to cut their gas taxes as well.
And how many provinces have done that, have made moves on gas taxes, Franco, offhand?
Yeah. So offhand, you have the Ontario government and the Newfoundland and Labrador government, both different political stripes at the time, originally make temporary tax cuts, then turned it into permanent tax cuts. So a couple wins out there for taxpayers. You previously had the Alberta government suspend gas taxes for a little while. However, it seems like the Smith government right now doesn't want to move on that, which is bad news. You also had the NDP government in Manitoba suspend its gas tax for a year, and I know the premier out there is currently wondering if he's going to do that again. So we have seen some big gas tax relief in Canadian provinces in the past. Time for them to do that right now.
Okay. I'm curious, Alto will be the subject of a Commons Committee meeting today. The finance minister's going to be there and talk about Alto, the high-speed rail project. What is the view of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on the value or the merit of the Alto high-speed rail project?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that. I've done a lot of research into high-speed rail in other countries, and I think it's safe to say there is an iron law of high-speed rail. And that is over budget, over time, under benefits, over and over again. I'm really worried about the cost of what this is going to impose on Canadian taxpayers. You've heard the government estimate, somewhere between $60 billion and $90 billion. So, even at the low end, that's a cost of more than $1,000 per each Canadian. But, expect those costs to balloon. Every time we get a cost estimate from the government, it's billions of dollars more. You look around the world, California's high-speed rail is an utter debacle. Cost started at about $30 billion. Now you're looking at about $100 billion more. Same story in the United Kingdom. And around the world, you just see these massive cost overruns averaging about 40% every time you have governments trying to build some high-speed rail.
Well, Franco, it's great to get caught up with you today and talk about these many issues. I appreciate your time.
Hey, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much.
That's Franco Terrazzano. He's the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We will talk some more politics right after the news. It's our Newsday panel. Trade will be our focus when we return. The latest breaking news is coming up next here on News Radio.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
It's time for our Wednesday Newsday panel. Federal politics in focus for us again today. Julia Parsons is back from Burson Hill in Knowlton. Julia, hope you're well these days. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
Along with Susan Smith, principal at Bluesky Strategy Group. Welcome back to you, Sue.
Thanks, Rob.
Well.
Thanks, Rob.
Good to
Spring
hear
is
from
strong
you.
in Ottawa.
Yes. It will soon be tulip time in Ottawa. Everybody
Yes.
loves tulip time.
Yes, and there's going to be downtown tulips and country tulips this time.
Oh,
Saunders
really?
Farm
Okay.
out in the East End, is doing a huge tulip thing this year, which is going to be brand new. It's called Tulip Fest, so people will have more to see. Yeah, super fun.
Well, let's get to the political news of the day. We have Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing the creation of what I would call a new and improved advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations. Members include former Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole, former Conservative cabinet minister from the Harper years, Lisa Raitt. So those are two blue politicians who see value in this from the Liberal Prime Minister. Meantime, Mr. Poilievre has, of course, been very critical of Mr. Carney's dealings with the Trump administration. Julia, what do you think of this development?
Yeah, I would actually see it a bit a different way, Rob. So I watched Poilievre's media scrum where he was asked, what do you think about having Erin O'Toole on this, for example? And he said it's great to see. And I think what's important is in politics, leaders can criticize certain aspects of the approach without saying everything needs to change. And we all benefit from that nuance, I think, in politics. So I noted that Poilievre has also offered conservative support for sort of like bipartisan engagement on Canada-U.S. trade policy and other trade negotiations as well. And I think having Lisa Raitt and Erin O'Toole, who are two, experienced former cabinet ministers who have significant backgrounds outside of politics, I think that's a good thing for Conservatives, but for Canadians more broadly. And I really don't see any difference between Mr. Poilievre's positioning and this work that they're going to be undertaking. And I think it's a great day for Canadians to see the sort of multi-partisan support for collaboration on these aspects.
Do you not think, Julia, just before we get to Sue, this is some kind of broadside, though, at Mr. Poilievre? Look, these Conservatives can get on board. What's wrong with Poilievre? What do you think?
No, not at all. I think it's actually taking Mr. Poilievre's suggestion that we have some bipartisanship engagement here. I mean, what's so important is that we have a united front in Canada on these matters. And yeah, I don't think there's any sort of broad stripe here that we need to consider.
Okay. What do you think, Sue?
I think it's Wednesday, so Mr. Poilievre finds some ways to criticize the government. I do agree that having Mr. O'Toole and Lisa Raitt and Jean Charest, who, don't forget, was a Mulroney-era cabinet minister before he was premier of Quebec. There are, I think, a number. There's a diverse range of voices, a diverse range of perspectives and of sectors on the Prime Minister's new council. There's CEOs, there's labor people, there's people in transport, manufacturing, all kinds of things. And I think it's a smart move on the part of the Prime Minister to have this kind of Canada-U.S. advisory committee. The more ears and the broader networks you have from an intel gathering perspective, I think informs any kind of approach. This is a chess game with Mr. Trump or President Trump. When his secretaries when his cabinet members are out saying Canada sucks, that kind of tone is permissible from the top. So the more intel and insight that the Prime Minister can use to inform the negotiating strategy that's coming up with the U.S., I think the better. Mr. Poilievre, was when he was last visiting the U.S., I don't know how many foreign trips he's ever done in his life, but he found his way to Texas and a couple of podcasts. He took the high road publicly, but since then there's been a Liberal majority, 3 by-elections where the results were not in Mr. Poilievre's favor. And so I've yet to see any constructive language out of him since then. So we'll see if he's able to hold that tone. I'm just not confident that leopard's ever going to change his spot.
Okay, but on this, you mentioned chess game. It's a chess game. Is it not a chess game for domestic politics as well? Like, doesn't this reflect poorly on Mr. Poilievre? What do you think, Susan?
In terms of the sour grapes approach or the adding Conservatives to the mix? Yeah, I think
adding Conservatives to the mix.
Yeah, and it's PCs that are the mix. Like Lisa Raitt, Erin O'Toole, and Jean Charest come from the progressive Conservative wing of the Conservative Party. If there were business leaders or others that I think the Prime Minister felt would be good value adds who come from the far right side of the Conservative Party, you might have seen them at the table. But the PM operates from a big tent perspective. Mr. Poilievre's tent seems to be shrinking. So it is a bit of a broadside to Mr. Poilievre, no doubt. He remains marginalized on one side of the party.
Okay. When we come back, we will ask our guests about the midterm elections in the United States. Those comments from Howard Lutnick, midterms November 3rd. And a chance that Democrats could make some gains at the expense of the Republicans. What does that mean for Canada and our relationship with the United States? And what does that mean for trade? When we come back, this is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
So we're talking politics at midweek with Julia Parsons from Burson, Hill and Knowlton, Susan Smith from Bluesky Strategy Group. Midterm elections in the United States are November 3rd. There's a chance, it's not a certainty, but there's a chance that Democrats could make gains at the expense of the Republicans. Now, Howard Lutnick, the very blunt-talking Commerce Secretary in the United States, was asked about this recently at an event that was put on. It was an economics event put on by the U.S. news outlet Semaphore. Let's listen to a little bit of this exchange here that made news in Canada.
America.
The former top Canadian trade negotiator said the other day that time is on.
Krista Friedland, who's like the worst.
A guy. I'm blanking on his name here, but the time is on our side, because the pressures on the U.S. are only going to increase over time. Basically, you guys are in political trouble. The longer they wait, the better a deal you're going to have to do.
Good for them. That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world. Okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
Is this nuts? They suck. Gosh almighty. But what are the chances, though, Sue, realistically here, that Canada's relationship with the United States could improve after the midterm elections in the United States?
Howard Lutnick is just so eloquent. What a classy guy. It could happen, but I think as long as President Trump has the Sharpie and the chair in the White House, it's not something Canadians can count on. There could be, if the Dems do well in the midterms and the Republicans get a smacking and Congress theoretically has more clout, or President Trump needs to set the table better for the federal election, which will be the next cycle. They could be a bit on their heels in terms of trying to get a deal and things done. But until then, it's TBD, and I wouldn't be holding my breath until then. But I do think there is a bit of merit, and Mr. Lutnick sounds a little worried, because it is right that the worse things look for the Republicans, the more they need to, the more they'll have to find a path to success. So, not a fulsome answer, not a straight answer,
no.
Because it's Trump.
Right. But I guess what I want to get at is, do you think this is seriously part of the strategy in Ottawa? Well, let's wait till after the midterms and see what things look like there. I don't think it's let's
wait till after the midterms, but they have to do, the Prime Minister's video this week was about forward guidance. They have to look at all scenarios and plan for all eventualities. And so, and this is going to be a protracted discussion. So there is a real world scenario where there, of course, is no new negotiated deal before November 3rd. So what does that mean if discussions are still ongoing after November 3rd? So it's just part of prudent management, prudent policy, or prudent strategy to look at all options are on the table and plan accordingly and be able to pivot, as Canadians have to do when it comes to Trump.
Okay. Julia, how do you see it, Julia? What do you think?
Yeah, if I was advising the government of Canada right now, I wouldn't be thinking of the future like that of, midterm elections. I think it's all so fast moving. I mean, we've even seen this in Canada. It was not too long ago that we had a totally different prime minister, a totally different political situation. I think we need to always be operating in the here and now. The Kuzma review coming up in July, we need to focus on what we can do today. And I think the government is taking action on some of those fronts. We've seen more on the diversifying trade partnerships. We've seen more on the advancing major projects. Doing more to build the Canadian economy, that sort of stuff needs to happen today to prepare us. And I think it would be prudent to focus on that, the here and now of today, and getting things done now rather than waiting it out. And I do think that is part of the Prime Minister's strategy so far. It's now going to be turning those announcements into action, into things advancing forward. That's really what's important.
I don't think the Prime Minister's waiting anything out. I think that there's lots of work going on behind the scenes, and you're right, the naming of the advisory committee and others. Janice Charette, Mark Wiseman, our new ambassador in the U.S. This is an active, hot file, and it's not a question of doing nothing or wait and see. It's a question of making sure that you're thinking through all possible alternatives.
Sure.
You're riding the bike and you're watching the turn signals, right? You're watching the traffic coming from all directions.
Okay. Very quickly, in a minute or less, because I do want to talk about Doug Ford's gravy plane that has now been sold back to Bombardier. But the Liberals are going to press ahead and try and get, can you hold off on the music, please? Are going to try and get a majority of the seats on the House of Commons committees. Why is that significant, Julia?
Look, it's incredibly important for the day-to-day work that parliamentarians do. I mean, for anyone who follows politics closely in Ottawa, that's where some of the biggest, scandals that the former Liberal government had come out through committee hearings. And that is also in part because the opposition has the majority on committee, so they were able to work with their partners on the bloc and others to sort of advance those issues forward. With this change, you're going to see that, and this is something I'll be watching very closely too, and I hope your listeners will be as well. You're going to have to see opposition members rethink how they approach issues, because you won't be able to necessarily negotiate with another opposition MP on a committee. And we may see more of a pivot towards media, towards online channels to raise issues and then work towards building something in committee. But ultimately, I think we've seen a lot of, some of the top issues emerge through the committee hearing process, and that's going to change when this motion comes to pass.
Okay, very quickly, Sue, on that in about 45 seconds.
I think more importantly, important legislation that's been passed through the House of Commons and come to committee for study will get proper study in the proper amount of time. It'll get the kind of scrutiny it needs. And as the Prime Minister said last week, less showboating, more hard work for Canadians in moving things forward. And the reality is, when you have, in our Westminster system, our parliamentary system, when you have a majority of seats in the House of Commons, you have a majority of seats on committee. And I think look for a more efficient passage of less scrutiny and passage of legislation coming forward.
Okay. Doug Ford and the gravy plane. When we come back, this is News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
Susan Smith is with us, Principal Bluesky Strategy Group. Julia Parsons from Burson, Hill and Knowlton. Julia, how surprised were you by how quickly Doug Ford flip-flopped on buying a private jet?
Well, I mean, I think you're referring to, Rob, he has already sold the plane. I think he said today we gave it back for the exact same price. And I think that's the right decision there. What is really important here, and I think we don't have this conversation enough in politics, is it really does benefit when politicians have that kind of approach that the Premier has, and being honest and saying, I heard the feedback and I'm pivoting. I'm listening to what the people are saying, and I'm willing to say, okay, I'm changing my direction. I think that's important in politics, and I think that's why we have seen Doug Ford receive, back-to-back mandates, is because he's someone who's honest and able to, listen to the concerns of Ontarians and react accordingly.
Okay. Sue, what do you think, Sue?
I'm old school in a couple of ways. One, I'll give Doug Ford props, just like Ralph Klein used to do. When Ralph made a mistake, he said, oops, I'm sorry. And I think Doug Ford did that in quick order to minimize the wound, cauterize the wound for this one. The other part of me that's old school, and this actually won't be popular, Ontario is a huge province. Canada is a huge country.
Yeah.
I suspect many of your listeners have wasted tons of time getting from A to B, sitting, canceled flights, all of those kinds of things. Once in a while, or maybe once in a while, it's efficient for our premiers and our political leaders to get from A to B really quickly. Not when there's a commercial flight. You can go Toronto to Ottawa on a commercial flight. That's great. But Toronto to Timmins, Toronto to Kapuskasing, Toronto way up north, everybody have a look at a map. That is not an easy place to get to. And same in Alberta, getting way to the north, et cetera. I think there's a time and a place for premiers to use charters or to use direct flights that are not commercial flights, because it makes them be able to do their job more efficiently. They can work on their planes. They can have conversations and discussions. You don't have to own the plane, but I think we need to make sure that we don't get so special in terms of, you have to take the $99 Ryanair flight or the equivalent of that, to get from A to B, and the work doesn't get done.
Well, you don't have to be small town cheap.
What do you want your premier doing?
Right?
Pardon? You don't. No, it's not. It's penny wise and pound foolish. I think the brand new, or not the brand new, the tone was off in the affordability scenario that we're in. But at the same time, this is a classic Canadian response too. This was a Bombardier plane. It was a Canadian plane. In other countries, Canadian leaders support Canadian industry and the Canadian jobs that these kinds of things create. So Ford made the right move, but I would defend him, within reason in terms of the need to use aircraft to get directly to some tougher places. Gotcha.
Thank you. Thanks to the both of you. I love the discussion today. All the best. Enjoy spring and the coming tulips. Bye-bye. Julia Parsons from Burson Hill and Knowlton, and Sue Smith from Bluesky Strategy Group. Talkback is coming up next on News Radio.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic, Carney, Trump, trade, and tariffs. And here's what we want to know. In your opinion, how is Prime Minister Mark Carney doing at trying to get a trade deal with the Trump administration? How's he doing? Would you say he's doing a good job? About as good as can be expected? Would you say it's too soon to tell? He's only been the prime minister for a year. Give it some time. Are you being patient? Or would you say he's doing a bad job? And our trading relationship with the United States is only getting worse after a year of Mark Carney as prime minister. Just what would you say? How do you view things? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. By the government's own admission, nothing even comes close to the importance of Canada's trading relationship with the United States when it comes to our economy. Just yesterday, as the Prime Minister was announcing this new and improved U.S. Trade Advisory Committee, his office sent out talking points to the news media that noted that the dollar value of the trade that happens every day between Canada and the United States is about $3.6 billion every single day. Like $3.6 billion today, $3.6 billion yesterday, $3.6 billion tomorrow, and so on and so forth. It's a big deal. It is a big deal. And making sure that Canadian businesses have access to that market, either tariff-free access or the lowest tariffs possible, is a very important job for the Prime Minister of Canada right now, if not the most important job. And that would be true no matter who the Prime Minister happens to be. But it happens to be Prime Minister Mark Carney right now. And we've heard from Prime Minister Mark Carney in recent days via a YouTube video. The Prime Minister made a 10-minute YouTube video. He talked about Canada's ties to the United States. And in that video, he said our close ties to the United States used to be a strength, but now it's a weakness. And he pointed to industries like the steel industry and the automotive industry and the forestry industry. And he said, we can't wait around hoping that the good old days are going to come back, or that the United States will, quote unquote, return to normal. So he's touting his vision to build Canada and strike new deals with other countries, new deals with China, new deals with India. But that doesn't erase that big number, $3.6 billion of trade every day between Canada and the United States, day after day after day. And while that's going on in the United States, you have comments from people like the United States Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who told a business audience that the Canadian strategy sucks, that we suck, and that it's a mistake for Canada to try and pivot away from the United States and pivot more toward countries like China. And he was especially critical of the Carney government's plan to allow Chinese-made EVs into this country. But look, here's the deal. The Canadian steel and aluminum industry is being hit with 50% tariffs. Non-CUSMA compliant autos and auto parts are being hit with 25% tariffs. The tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber have more than doubled this year to more than 45%. Furniture exports 25% tariffs. Copper exports 50% tariffs. 10% tariff on Canadian energy exports to the U.S. And it's obviously having an impact on our economy. We have seen Canadian workers lose their jobs, get layoff notices from steel mills, from auto assembly plants, from lumber yards and sawmills. We have seen as the unemployment rate goes to 6.7%, it has been higher than that. It's been above 7% in the last year. Economic growth is tepid, to be kind. The last reading for GDP growth was 0.1%. Not 1%, but 0.1%. And the only reason there was any growth at all was because of the strong performance of the oil and gas sector. Output on the manufacturing side of the economy actually contracted. And a lot of that is because of tariffs imposed by our largest and most important trading partner, the United States. Obviously, Canada didn't want these tariffs. They were imposed on Canada. We all understand that. But it's Prime Minister Mark Carney's job to try and get these tariffs either eliminated or greatly reduced. And that's what he said he would do when he was running in the last election. And that's why Canadians in great enough numbers put their faith in him. But the tariffs are still in place. Some of them are higher than they were a year ago. And there does not seem to be any kind of deal on the horizon. The economy in Canada really isn't lighting anyone's hair on fire right now. And about the only big news on the U.S.-Canada trade file is the creation of a new advisory panel, which is really a leftover idea from the Trudeau years. So how is Prime Minister Mark Carney doing, in your opinion, with this very important situation on getting a trade deal with the United States? A good job? Too soon to tell? Or a bad job? And there should have been some sort of breakthrough by now. There is nothing more important than this file for the Canadian economy, trade with the United States. How is Mark Carney doing at trying to fix what's broken? 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. If you've never called before, just mention that. We will make your call a priority. Let's talk about Carney, Trump, trade, and tariffs today. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know, and this is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Carney, Trump, trade, tariffs. That's our topic of the day. In your opinion, how is the Prime Minister doing at getting a trade deal with the United States? Good job? Too soon to tell? Bad job? Just what would you say? 1-833-668-2577. This is a big topic for the country. It's a big topic in political Ottawa right now. In fact, Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party leader, was asked about this in light of the news that the Carney government is resurrecting a new trade advisory council, to advise the Prime Minister. Aaron O'Toole is going to be a part of that advisory council. Lisa Raitt, Kate Bretner, lives in Milton now and is former Harper-era cabinet minister. Pierre Poilievre was asked about this, and he's okay with the creation of this new advisory council. But what he's saying is Where's the action? What has happened over the last year on this file? Let's listen to a little bit of that.
It's great. At the end of the day, though, what we need is action. Mark Carney was elected on the singular promise that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. Since that time, American tariffs have doubled and broadened on Canadian goods. Carney's given us the worst economy in the G7, the only shrinking economy in the G7. We're hemorrhaging jobs. Just 10 days ago, the Americans hit us with much bigger tariffs on products that include Canadian steel. And what has Mark Carney done, really, in a year on this? He hasn't held negotiations in 5 months. The Mexicans are going to be at the table formally with the Americans any day. The only talks that Mark Carney is doing are YouTube videos where he's comparing himself to Sir Isaac Brock and holding up little figurines in his office. So he told all of you the other day that with his new majority he was going to stop showboating. And then a few days later, he put out a showboating YouTube video, right? The 2.6 million Canadians whose jobs depend on getting rid of these terrible American tariffs have had about enough of Mark Carney making false promises and delivering the worst economy in the G7.
So that's the view of the opposition leader. We want to know your view. 1-833-668-2577. Fred is up first today on Talkback in Calgary. Hello, Fred.
Hi, Rob. Good morning. How are you today?
Hi, Fred. Very good, Fred. Thank you. What's your opinion?
Well, I think, I'll be honest with you, I voted for Polyev. I thought there's a guy we need. But every day I just thank the Lord that he didn't get in, because you're talking apples and oranges when you're talking Carney and him. Carney is very professional, very well educated. You know, he's not controversial. He seems to think things out before he does it. I think he's got, you know, the two Epstein boys, Trump and Lubnick. I think he's got them right where he wants them. You know, if you think back when Trump kept saying, we don't need anything Canada has, it's pretty hard to negotiate with someone that, you know, that's the way they're going to treat you and make fun of you as the 51st governor and, you know, this and that. So I think Carney's awesome. I think
you think he's awesome.
Problems.
You think he's awesome?
I honestly do.
Really? Do you really think you'd feel that way if you were working at a steel mill in Ontario or at an auto plant in Ontario?
Well,
or at an aluminum smelter in Quebec? That's or a lumber yard or a lumber sawmill?
I listened to you say that a few minutes ago, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't know that was actually happening. So I feel real bad about that. But I don't think that Polyev could change that if he was in either. I think it's all the Americans. We got them where we want them, and I think the negotiations are still to come, and they're going to be tough. But as before this, we needed outside help from different countries buying our stuff. But when you said that earlier, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my God, I didn't know that. So I don't know. You didn't know
that? How did you not know that?
Well, I thought they were dealing with it. I thought that we were sending products to Europe, like Carney was saying. We got new markets. We got this. We got that. You know, and that's the truth. I believe that he was over there, and this was not the greatest, but we found an avenue where we could make the best of the, you know, they make the best of the worst till this is all over. Yeah, you got to remember there's a war going on too. Our fuel's up. That's not his fault. Along with the fuel goes the groceries. Along with the groceries, you know, the trucking. I'm into clearing land, and right now in Calgary, jobs are being put on hold or slowed down because of mega machines that use mega fuel and mega prices that the clients didn't agree to. You know, so they're waiting and saying, should we waste the money or? So I think Carney's holding. I think he's doing great. Like as far as
you think he's doing great. I've been asking, is he doing a good job? You think he's doing a great job?
I think he is. I think compared to what Polyev would have done, I think he's doing an awesome job.
All right. Thank you. All right. That's out there. And we're off and running on Talkback today. He thinks we're doing a great job. But there's no deal, no signs of a deal, no talks. And tariffs just keep going up. How do you think he's doing? We have made concessions as well. Don't forget, we dropped reciprocal tariffs. Some people say we should bring those back. Got rid of the digital services tax. What did that get us? Not much so far. 1-833-668-2577. What is the Carney record on trade with the United States? The biggest, most important trade deal for this country. Have your say. Every single phone line is available right now. I am shocked to see that. Are your elbows up so high that you just can't see? This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
In your opinion, how is Prime Minister Mark Carney doing at trying to get a trade deal with the United States? That's our question on Talkback today. There are 4 lines available, 1-833-668-2577. Calvin, up next in Calgary today. Hello, Calvin.
Hi there. Just a quick comment. Just over a year ago, I spent the better part of 3 months in the UK. And, of course, as soon as I open my mouth, everyone goes, oh, you're Canadian. I ran into less than 1% of the people that had anything positive to say about Mark Carney as the governor of the Bank of England. They were all saying, geez, that's too bad that he's going to be running your country. They had nothing positive to say at all in general. I feel that he's a lot of talk, and to this point, he's really produced nothing. Everyone comes out and says, oh, geez, he's got the education, he's got this, he's got that. He hasn't shown anything that he's done with it. And, I think he's just riding on, a lot of hot wind kind of thing more than anything. Like I said, he just hasn't produced anything. And I don't know that he really is going to. And that's my opinion.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that, Calvin, but just before you run, what about, say, an opinion from the previous caller who said, look at what we're dealing with on the other side and, compare him to, say, Poilievre. Do you think we'd be in any better position if the dynamic was changed and it was, say, Poilievre at the helm?
That is a good point. There is certainly things that, as Prime Minister that, happen within the world that are really beyond your point or your scope of control. One of the things is, wars in other countries and how that affects the oil and gas prices and things like that. But I think that, in my opinion, I think that Poilievre would have a better tone to deal with it, just with regards to people in the country. I just feel that, again, Carney is talking down to a lot of people. And I think in general things would be more positive if Poilievre was in control of the country.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Calvin. Let's go to John, who's up next on Talkback. Hello, John. Thanks for calling, John.
Hey, Rob. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good, John. What's your opinion?
Good. I kind of agree with the last caller there. Carney's just been a lot of talk and no action, running around the world stating that he's made these trade deals with everybody. I remember the one he said he made with Saudi Arabia for an additional $2 billion in trade that they're going to do with us over the next 10 years or something, which is basically a drop in the bucket to the 700 or 800 billion that we do with the States in a year. Like you said, 3.6 billion today, 3.6 billion tomorrow. There's not another market out there like the States, geographically close to us, yet that kind of sales that we can do with them. China's not that, and neither is Russia. I think we really dropped the ball putting Carney in. He promised to negotiate with Trump, never did. Insulted him, if anything, let Rob Ford insult him, which really pissed him off. Doug Rob, same thing. Anyways, I think Poilievre would have done a hell of a lot better job just because of his demeanor. He doesn't come at it as an insulting way, which really bothers Trump and those negotiators down there. You've got to play their game. They're the ones with the ball. They're the ones with the court. We're the hitting team.
You think there should have been a breakthrough by now? Fair enough. Thank you for your call. More of your calls after the news. Carney's record on trade with Trump when we come back. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, I am back. I was away for a couple of days earlier in the week, just getting over a spring cold. Those are just the worst. But back live doing Talkback here on a Wednesday. Would love to hear from you. We're talking about trade today. Trade with the United States, the Carney record. In your opinion, how is he doing, our prime minister, at getting a trade deal with the United States? A good job, as good as could be expected right now? Too soon to tell. Is he doing a bad job? Should there have been a breakthrough by now? What do you think? We have 5 lines available. Come on, folks. Let's listen, though, to some of what's been said recently by people who are kind of in the middle of all of this. I mean, first of all, you have to listen to a little bit of Howard Lutnick. He's the Secretary of Commerce in the United States, a blunt talking guy, no doubt, made a fortune on Wall Street. He was recently in some hot water because of a trip he made to Jeffrey Epstein's island. But he was at an event recently put on by the U.S. news outlet called Semaphore. This made news in Canada. He was asked whether Canada is basically ragging the puck. This idea that the midterms are coming up in the United States and the Democrats are going to do better than the Republicans. And the midterms is the belief. So the longer Canada waits in this midterm election year to get a deal with the United States, the better it will be for Canada. So let's listen to this. This made news in Canada because of the "we suck" soundbite.
The former top Canadian trade negotiator said the other day that time is on.
Krista Friedland is like the worst.
A guy. I'm blanking on his name here, but the time is on our side because the pressures on the U.S. are only going to increase over time. Basically, you guys are in political trouble. The longer they wait, the better a deal you're going to have to do.
Good for them. That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world. Okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
So not the most flattering words from someone who is in the thick of whatever's happening behind the scenes. They suck. That's us. We suck. We have a terrible strategy. We shouldn't be cozying up to China. Carney has a problem with us. Nothing nice to say about Chrystia Freeland, but I mean, there are lots of Canadians who are glad Chrystia Freeland's not in the government anymore. But look, that's one of the top people in the Trump administration on the trade file. And he doesn't sound very happy with how things are going with whatever is going on. And he doesn't have much nice to say about the job that the prime minister is doing and trying to come up with a deal with the United States. That's what we want to know. How is our prime minister doing? Trying to deal with, well, that. People like Howard Lutnick. Carolyn in Red Deer. Thanks for calling. Carolyn.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I think he's doing a horrible job.
Horrible job. Okay.
He's doing a horrible job. The only thing that he has put through has been what has been suggested by the conservative people. And he is the one also that said that we're done with the U.S. And yet his trade person, Dominic LeBlanc, is saying, oh, no, we need to be dealing with the U.S. 80% of our trade. They're just talking, they're saying one thing and then they're doing another. He has accomplished 0 trade deals with any other country. It's like an MOU with Alberta. Is it going to happen? Who knows? There's no guarantees at all. And we need the states. The Americans have been our ally for years, and he's selling them off as the worst thing that's ever been. And that is not true. It's just not. We need them. The people that live in Ontario, they need them. I think he's done a terrible job. And that gentleman in Calgary that you had to point out, well, what about those auto workers? Oh, I didn't know about that. Well, he's listening to CBC or CTV. he's got his head in the sand, like so many Canadians, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say, but
okay. He also said, well, would we be doing any better if Pierre Poilievre was in office right now, or the Conservatives were in the government right now? Which, I wonder, would we be any further along as well? What do you think about that?
I do. I really do.
You do?
I mean,
Okay.
like I said, the only things that the Liberals have put through are what has been suggested by the Conservatives, and not, like time and time again, they keep hammering it through. You need to do this, you need to, and finally they do a little snippet of it. Okay, well, we'll do this. He just wants us all to shut up so that he can do whatever he wants, and I find it very scary. I'm sorry. I'm very worried about this country for my grandchildren. I only probably have another 20 years here, so yes. So no, I'm very worried for Canada. I truly am, sincerely.
Right. You'd be hoping that, because his defenders say, well, he's only been there a year and look what he's dealing with on the other side. You still think there should have been some advancement?
Trump was elected before he was, and he knew that was there. And he's the one that kept saying, I will get a deal. I will get down there. I will get a deal. Elbows up, everybody. We're going to do this. No problem. And nothing has happened. Absolutely zero. Very frustrating.
So you're very disappointed, very frustrated. I got you, Carolyn. Thank you. Let's move along. 1-833-668-2577 to have your say on Talkback. Just putting the Carney record to test on one of the biggest files facing our country right now, our trading relationship with the United States. It's in focus, in the spotlight, under the microscope. How are things going, in your opinion? I'm Rob Snow. This is Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Carney, Trump, trade, tariffs are topic of the day. How is Prime Minister Mark Carney doing and trying to get a trade deal with the United States? Love to hear from you today on the topic. Alan in Lethbridge today. Hello, Alan. What would you say, Alan?
Hi, how you doing again? Great. I always enjoy your show, and I can't wait to say something. Today, I wanted to point out that yes, I agree that that Carney should be doing more to trade with the United States. Of course, they're our best partner. One thing I'm glad about, though, is that he's not helping this. A criminal, a crook, basically Donald Trump and Lutnick. This peace thing that they have, where he's putting money in his pockets, he's stealing money from his own country. The guy is just a real crook. So the fact that Carney is not negotiating with this guy, with Trump, is a good thing. And he's waiting for the midterms to come along. In the meanwhile, he's making friends with the European Union and even China. And I realize those things are far away.
Yes.
But he's avoiding putting any money in his criminals' pockets. Trump is not any good to his own country. His tariffs are ridiculous. They're going to have to pay back all this money to his own country that through tariffs that he's extorted from them. The things that he does in building this thing on his White House and the art cultural thing, they're all just money makers for him and his family. Carney is doing the right thing. Unfortunately, we're not in war with the States. The States is a great country, and so are the people there. But the fact that he's not even talking to these Latinx and people like that.
But should there have been some progress by now?
No, and I'm glad it hasn't. And I'm glad it hasn't because this negotiating with Trump is like talking to somebody who doesn't represent the states. He doesn't. And I know that the governors and everybody else who does their own little deals within provinces and that's a great way to go. But this thing of negotiating with Trump is the guy's a criminal. There's no way that you want to. He revokes on his word. I realize Polyev is a person who probably has a better repertoire with him, but I'm glad that
Well, if you think back to when Mr. Carney went to the Oval Office, and the two seemed to be getting along just fine, and Prime Minister Mark Carney had nice things to say about Donald Trump and his handling of NATO and these sorts of things, and the president had nice things to say about the prime minister as well. They seem to have a certain kind of rapport.
Exactly. Well, even NATO, you can see how NATO is not talking to him. You can see how the rest of the countries around the world are not talking to him. He's not a person of his word. How can you negotiate with a criminal who only has his own agenda? There's no way that he represents the United States. Another thing about Polyev, he's really not representing Canada. He's losing his own cabinet. The people are just running away from his own talk. And unfortunately, the Conservatives are a great party. It's a great party. We need them. We need everybody in there. But Polyev as leader, he's lost touch of his own party.
So how would you describe the Carney record on trade with the United States right now? A success?
Well, I'm glad he's not talking to Trump. He's doing things on a quiet. I mean, hopefully this idea of the midterms coming along, then we'll be negotiating as well. Free trade. We need that free trade with Mexico. That's all worked well. That's all worked excellently with Canada has, and we've profited so well as countries. We need them. We need tourism. We need everything that comes along with the states. I'm not a fan of China in any way. I don't believe in many of the things that they do politically and everything else. But we don't have to negotiate with Trump. He's not a person.
So it's okay that there's been no progress on the trade file because we shouldn't be talking to that guy anyway.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Carney is nothing's been done, all for the better, because it's just going to be neglected anyways. Trump's going to turn around tomorrow and they'll say, no, I just changed my mind. He can't be trusted. He's nobody in the world trusts him. So why should Canada even talk to him? And his cronies around him, they're all crooks. How can you talk to these guys? They don't represent the United States people.
As the prime minister would say, you have to take the world as it is, not as you want it to be. That's his whole worldview, right? That's why he's going and he's willing to do deals with, Saudi Arabia, for example, or China, or the UAE. The UAE, all countries with very dubious records on things like human rights. For example, but Mr. Carney says, we have to take the world as it is, not as we want it to be. And, the same thing would have to apply with the United States, if that's your worldview. But thank you. No, I appreciate your opinion, Alan, and I'll give you a full airing. 1-833-668-2577. The Prime Minister was cornered by members of the press gallery today on Parliament Hill on his way into his weekly caucus meeting on Parliament Hill. I'll let you hear what he had to say. He was talking about trade, and we want to hear from you. And you tell us how you think Mark Carney has been doing over the last year that he has been Prime Minister. It's been about 51 weeks now since the last federal election. He said he would fix this. How's he doing at that? This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We're talking trade today, the trade file, our trading relationship with the United States, and the Carney record. Paul in Edmonton is up next. Thanks for calling, Paul.
Hello, Rob.
Yeah,
I was just reviewing this comment made by Emmett Murphy-Smith. He was a psychologist and took on the fact of finding out leadership IQ. And I find Prime Minister Carney probably, out of the 7 core traits, he's only probably has 3 of the 7 in his favor. I know that he's an achiever. As far as pragmatic being in problem solving, I think he has the intellectual ability to do that with all the degrees that he has. So that's 2 on this record. And strategic humility, I think there's a bit of a lack in that regard, because I don't think he speaks in layman's terms, and he probably is more satisfying to the intellectuals, and I think that's a problem that he might have. And service focused, I would probably say he's dedicated in that regard. Commitment, he's not staying on course with the promises he's made, and I really feel that there is a lack of commitment on his part there. And as far as number 6, learned optimism, I'll probably give him half credit on that, noting that the glass, he indicates that his glass is half full. And responsible, he's not passing the buck, and I think he is passing the buck.
How do you think he's passing the buck?
Yeah.
How do you think, why do you say he's passing the buck?
He's passing the buck onto the United States of America, and
I see.
That's the problem. Yeah, I think there's too much blame placed on USA, but they have their own problems, and I think every country is for their own, in a sense. But I think one thing that I believe will probably unite America and Canadian trade is the Arctic, because the Arctic is. The sovereignty of the Arctic is a very beneficial part of Canada, and the critical minerals up in that location are so essential, and sort of reciprocate U.S. military responsibility in helping us secure that sovereignty. I think that's the way that it's going to go, and I think that's going to amalgamate the 2 countries.
So, Paul, just to kind of tie a bow on this here, he's been the prime minister for a year. This has been really the dominant issue in our politics, trying to deal with Donald Trump. It's not easy. Everyone recognizes that. I guess what I'm trying to drive at here today with this question is, did you think after a year maybe we'd be a little further along by now in our dealings with the U.S.?
The problem is he's putting his intellectual manner ahead of Trump. Trump is basically a layman type of individual, and that's where Trump succeeds. And Carney has favored the intellectuals and not the layman. We don't understand what he's saying. Another thing that I really felt hurt by in his speech during his Liberal convention, and he made a comment that the Canadian society is going to be transformed, and I don't understand what he meant by that, and he hasn't expanded on it.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up there. Paul, thank you from Edmonton today. That's it for hour number 1. A full hour just ahead. We'll kick this around a little bit more. The Carney record on trying to get a trade deal with the U.S. Probably the most important job that he has for the health of our economy. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback for this Wednesday. I'm Rob Snow. It's great to be back with you for this week. We've been talking about Prime Minister Mark Carney, Trump, trade, tariffs, and asking, in your opinion, how's the Prime Minister doing at getting a trade deal with the United States? Is he doing a good job? About as good as could be expected right now? Is it too soon to tell? It's only been a year. Give it some time. Is he doing a bad job? There should have been some sort of breakthrough by now. This is the talk of Parliament Hill this week. Where's the trade deal? What's happening with the trade deal? No sign of a trade deal. Tariffs keep going up. Canadians keep losing their jobs in tariff-sensitive industries. For example, let's listen to a little bit of Pierre Poilievre.
It's great. At the end of the day, though, what we need is action. Mark Carney was elected on the singular promise that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. Since that time, American tariffs have doubled and broadened on Canadian goods. Carney's given us the worst economy in the G7, the only shrinking economy in the G7. We're hemorrhaging jobs. Just 10 days ago, the Americans hit us with much bigger tariffs on products that include Canadian steel. And what has Mark Carney done, really, in a year on this? He hasn't held negotiations in 5 months. The Mexicans are going to be at the table formally with the Americans any day. The only talks that Mark Carney is doing are YouTube videos where he's comparing himself to Sir Isaac Brock and holding up little figurines in his office. So he told all of you the other day that with his new majority he was going to stop showboating. And then a few days later, he put out a showboating YouTube video, right? The 2.6 million Canadians whose jobs depend on getting rid of these terrible American tariffs have had about enough of Mark Carney making false promises and delivering the worst economy in the G7.
Okay, so that's Pierre Poilievre, the official opposition leader, the leader of the Conservative Party. Now, today was caucus day on Parliament Hill. That's when all the parties have their weekly caucus meetings. They talk shop, they plot strategy, and trade was certainly top of mind for members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery as they cornered the Prime Minister on his way in to meet with his Liberal colleagues. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
Well, should Canada make any more concessions to get to the table with the U.S., and how do you balance them giving you a list? And if you finish that list...
No, there is a, well, first thing, we have multiple levels of contact. We work through a series of issues. We understand what some of the, what the Americans would call trade irritants or trade issues are. We have some on our side as well. We're well prepared around those issues. We will sit down and work through those issues with the broader approach in the negotiation. We've made some counter proposals, which they're aware, and the time will come to really roll up our sleeves. But ce n'est pas le cas d'avoir un demandeur, un autre supplicant. C'est pas le cas de tout. Like, it's not a case of the United States dictates the terms. We have the negotiation. We can come to a mutually successful outcome. It will take some time. We have a very strong team in this government, and I believe in the team, the ministers, Secretary of State, parliamentary secretaries, responding to Canadians. And that's important. That's important to how we govern. We govern as a team. We've got a lot on, important questions about the U.S., but at the same time, as I started, it's Earth Day, and one of the big things that the government is doing is the most ambitious, not strategy, but plan to put into place to achieve our goals with respect to protecting what really is, many, I would argue.
Right. So then he went on to talk about Earth Day and environmental policy. But on trade policy and trying to get a deal with the United States, he said multiple points of contact. They have irritants. We have irritants. And it will take some time. That's the view from the Prime Minister. But is that good enough for you? And how would you judge this Prime Minister's record so far a year into the job? 1-833-668-2577 and have your say on Talkback. Mike in Kincardine. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Rob. I would grade the Prime Minister and give him a C+. And the reason I'm doing this is because I believe that Donald Trump doesn't believe in globalization, doesn't believe in free trade, and Canada will eventually have to pay some tariff of some sort. They've got a $39 trillion deficit. They need to pay it off somehow. Now, I worked 43 years in the steel industry. I'm seeing my fellow colleagues' jobs being decimated and stuff like that. I think the strategy should be, instead of waiting for the midterms, is to stop the bleeding, sign an interim deal with Trump. Yes, we're going to have to pay some tariffs, but I would like Carney to stop being a Bohica man. You know what Bohica means, Rod?
To fill me in on that.
Over, here it comes again, because he's talking like a CEO. He's talking like a CEO, and he's talking about themes and strategies and all this other stuff. Mark, You told us you were going to build nation-building projects. Mark, you told us we were going to have trade deals and stuff like that. Now, I don't expect the supply chains to change overnight, but I do expect to see some progress. Stop talking about strategies and themes and all this other stuff. Where is the action? And that's why he's getting a C+, Rob.
All right, Mike. Thank you. Off and running hour number 2 of Talkback at 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, mention that to us. Love to hear from first-time callers here on Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know, and it's News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What is the Carney record on trying to get a trade deal with the United States? He's been there a year. Is he doing a good job trying to get a trade deal with the United States? A good job, too soon to tell, a bad job. And there should have been some sort of breakthrough by now. 1-833-668-2577. 5 lines available. The wait won't be long at all. Pat is in Kitchener. Hello, Pat.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Pat. What would you say, Pat?
Good. Yeah, I would say that I don't think he's doing a very good job, because if you compare his time spent on trade diversification away from the U.S., he spent a lot of his time on that strategy, and I think it could potentially bear fruit, but at the same time, he hasn't spent a lot of time on trying to negotiate a deal with the U.S. In fact, he now believes that our relationship with the U.S. is a strategic hindrance to us. So it's kind of like a weakness from what he's telling us. He set up this committee now, in my view, to kind of, in the event that something goes wrong and Kuzma is not renegotiated, to place blame on Trump, first and foremost, as he's done always to really get elected. And now he's going to, to a certain extent, lay blame at the feet of this new committee. And so I think he's positioned himself politically to blame Trump, as he's always done. And there's enough Canadians that will really swallow that message. And then the other aspect is this committee that he's going to shift blame to. That's my view.
All right, Pat. Thank you. I mean, one of the reasons that we wanted to raise this topic today, we have multiple news outlets now, French CBC, Radio Canada, the Globe and Mail. They're saying that the Trump administration is, quote, demanding upfront concessions as a precondition of negotiations on Kuzma. And that is something that the Prime Minister pushed back on today. According to sources whispering things in Canadian journalists' ears, is that the Trump administration has asked Canada to unilaterally change or scrap domestic policies from dairy, like supply management. There are the provincial bans on American liquor that the premiers push back on. Doug Ford says that's a non-starter. They're just not going to sell the American-made booze. But other what we call digital cultural policies, whether it's the Online Streaming Act or the Online News Act, the Americans want to see some progress, some concessions on this before they sit down and do kind of a full-blown renegotiation of Kuzma. But really, are these the hills we want to die on? I guess I would ask you. Our digital cultural laws, supply management, booze bans. I mean, you take supply management, for example. So the Trump administration is the latest U.S. administration that wants some concessions on supply management. This is hardly anything new. It is nothing new for an American president to complain about what some Canadians call the dairy cartel. This has been a trade irritant, not just for the Americans, but for countries all over the world. our dairy sector, New Zealand, Australia, the European Union, they have all complained for years and years and years that our dairy quota system is protectionist. It was a big issue when Canada was at the negotiating table for TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. New Zealand and Australia, who were both part of the TPP, both complained about how we lock out dairy products from their countries through our quota system and our high tariffs. Yeah, and they said to Canada, how can you call yourself free traders and support a system like supply management? And the same thing came up when Canada was negotiating the Canada-EU trade deal, CETA. It came up again. And we faced the same accusations again. Hey, we're trying to do free trade here, and you're keeping your dairy market closed, and your egg market closed, and your poultry market closed, for that matter. We still managed to get those deals done by opening up tiny slivers of market access to foreign product and compensating Canadian farmers in the process. And yet there is still no political will in Ottawa to make any significant changes to supply management. And that's just a Carney Liberal thing. It was a Trudeau Liberal thing. And it's a thing from all the political parties in Ottawa. The Conservatives, the NDP, the Bloc, none of them would support significantly changing supply management. And yet what do we know is one of the top trade irritants for Trump, supply management, and our dairy sector. And yet we can't seem to get past this. What do we have? 9,000 dairy farmers in the entire country? Standing in the way of making some kind of progress on a trade deal with the United States. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The Carney record on trade with the United States. How is the Prime Minister doing on this file? What's your opinion after a year of Mr. Carney on the job? 1-833-668-2577. Let's go to Steve, is in Calgary today. Hello, Steve.
Hey, I found it interesting that you're talking about the supply management system. I was looking at this last week, actually, because I thought it was an interesting thing, and I knew it's like a sticky trade topic. But when Australia abolished theirs, it cost them almost $1.75 billion that they had to pay back to their farmers to try and make up for it. But the estimates in Canada, like if they were to eliminate the quota system in Canada, it would be like $30 to $60 billion, the ag economists figure. And then it would also cause, like if they were to eliminate it, it would cause issues too, because so many farmers borrow against their quota. Like that's what they use as collateral.
Right.
So it would be.
Yeah, because the quota is so valuable, right? Yeah. But according to the news reports, Steve, it's not that the Trump administration is even calling for that. It's not as though it's saying, we want you to get rid of supply management. We want you to end supply management altogether. They just want more access than they have right now to our market.
Right. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what they do end up doing with that, but I do think it would be a massive sticking point on Canada's, because, man, it would be political suicide for them to do anything like that, I think. Because especially considering there's so many quota holders in Quebec and Ontario, like that's where the bulk of the Canadian dairy quota, I don't know about poultry or eggs, but the bulk of the dairy quota is Quebec and Ontario. I think the Liberals would see a massive hit in their polls if they were to do anything with it. But.
Well, and what they're terribly afraid of, I think, and this is why you won't get Liberal politicians or politicians of any stripe proposing any significant changes to supply management, is because of the potential for farmer protests. We've seen those in Ottawa before, and we've seen those all over the world, right? The last thing politicians in Ottawa want to see is farm equipment in front of Parliament Hill, like some kind of repeat of the Freedom Convoy. You know, farmers spilling milk in front of the Parliament buildings would be like a political nightmare for them.
Yeah, yeah, it wouldn't be a good deal. It'll be interesting to see what they do. I think he's had a rough go on the trade thing. Like a lot of people have said, he hasn't held up what he said he's going to do, but it's going to be very interesting to see what does come out of it all, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. for your call. As I say, it's not that the Americans are calling for an end of supply management. What they're saying is we would like to have more market access for our dairy products, specifically, raw dairy products. I mean, fresh milk doesn't travel well. The Carney government's position is, well, you're not even using all the market access that you have to the Canadian market already. Why do you need more? I would remind everyone that Parliament passed a law at the behest of the Bloc Québécois, where most of the dairy farmers are. And that law says supply management must be protected in any trade deal. Full stop. They all defend supply management. But the other angle to the whole thing on supply management is just the cost of living as a major source of stress for people and the price of food. And it's well documented. It's well researched. Supply management means we pay higher prices for our eggs and our chickens and our dairy products, our turkeys. They would all be cheaper without supply management. Anti-poverty groups have looked into this. The National Advisory Council on Poverty says supply management inflates the price of food, and it hits low-income families the hardest. They say it's a system that actually protects wealthy dairy farmers and punishes the poor. I mean, you could make the case. Not only would it be good for advancing trade talks with the United States, there are good homegrown reasons to debate the merits of supply management, regardless of what Donald Trump wants. The Americans want more access to the Canadian market for their dairy farmers, but we don't want to set any preconditions for negotiations, according to the Prime Minister, who has yet to achieve any sort of significant breakthrough over the last year on trade with the United States, which is what we're examining today on Talkback with your help at 1-833-668-2577. Have your say. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Trade and the Carney record on trade dealings with the United States. Our topic of the day. How is he doing, in your opinion? There's been no meaningful breakthrough on trade negotiations with the United States in the last year. If anything, tariffs have been going up and job losses in tariff-sensitive industries have been climbing. I mentioned Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, basically asked at a recent conference in the U.S. if Canada's ragging the puck, waiting until the midterm elections, which seem to be favoring the Democrats right now, and that if that comes to pass, it might mean better conditions for Canada. Let's listen to that again.
Canadian trade negotiator said the other day that time is on.
Krista Friedland, who's like the worst.
No, a guy. I'm blanking on his name here, but the time is on our side because the pressures on the U.S. are only going to increase over time. Basically, you guys are in political trouble. The longer they wait, the better a deal you're going to have to do.
Good for them. That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look. We are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world, okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars. I mean, is this nuts?
Is this nuts? Is this nuts? They suck. Now, our top person on the trade file, aside from the Prime Minister, is a woman named Janice Charette. Very low-key, but very well-respected veteran in Ottawa government circles. She's not a politician, but she's been at the very top of government in Ottawa for a very long time. And she was recently at an event in Ottawa. It was put on by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And she was asked about how things are going on the trade front. She was asked about this looming deadline, July 1st, and what we could expect to happen if that day, say, comes and goes and there's still no deal. And she's not expecting any kind of big deal to be announced by Canada today. Let's listen to that.
Not all progress is going to be visible here, and you will hear all kinds of things through this negotiating process. We're not going to negotiate this in public. I don't think that's in Canada's interest. But I can assure you that we are absolutely constructively engaged. We have been for months, and we will continue to be.
constructively engaged. She's been saying things, and she said it at this event. There's signal and then there's noise. And some people are interpreting that as when you listen to Howard Lutnick and his bombast, that's the noise. That's someone close to Trump saying those things because it plays well with the hardcore American first MAGA crowd. Canada sucks. They suck. Americans are the best. Canada wants to cozy up to China. Canada will pay a price for that. What Janice Charette seems to be saying is, you don't see everything. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And if you take her at her word, she's convinced that all sides, including Mexico here, all three countries that are involved in this CUSMA agreement, they're all on the same page. They all agree it's a good deal that only needs some tinkering here and there. And that's what's happening right now, is the tinkering, and we don't see the tinkering, and we won't see all the tinkering. But we haven't seen a deal yet either, or anything close to looking like a deal. That's our focus today. What do you think? 1-833-668-2577. Rob is a first-time caller. Thanks for calling, Rob. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Rob.
To answer your question directly, I think he's doing an absolute awful, horrible job. I've been in business all my working life. And when you have a customer that buys 75% of everything you are trying to sell or export, you don't go traipsing around the world and basically ticking this customer off. I'm in no way suggesting we need to kowtow or cater to whatever Trump wants, but you don't tick off your biggest customer. All he's done is go around, as Polyev has said, get on his high horse, give all these fancy, flowery speeches, and he's doing this and doing that, but he's produced nothing. There is not one extra dollar of revenue that has come into this country in a year since he's been there as prime minister. Not one extra dollar to pay for that ballooning deficit that he has created, not $1 to pay for all the extra costs that he has brought in, all this extra support, committees, blah, blah, blah. And people need to start really looking at some numbers and facts of what's going on in this country. Last year, they put out the figure that our simple GST collection, 5% of every dollar we spend in this country, $43.5 billion, approximately $43.5 billion. Every dollar of that went to pay the interest on the debt. And this was before he increased the huge deficit that we're going to be looking at this year. He said in his initial, and he hoodwinked the people of Ontario and Quebec to voting for him because he was going to be elbows up and he was going to be the one to fight Trump, and that he was going to turn Canada into an energy superpower. Well, what he should have done the first week in office, and not just because I'm from Alberta, but the numbers make sense, is that he should have announced a pipeline to the West Coast to feed our oil and LNG to China and Southeast Asia. That would have got Trump's attention. Instead, all he's been doing is going around the world talking about, now that today he's talking about some environmental Earth Day things, which is, well, we all know what that is. But how are we going to become a superpower if he doesn't realize and acknowledge the fact and do it quickly? Now we're going to wait till the midterms, till elections, till he announces something. The people of Ontario and Quebec, as much as I feel bad for the auto industry, the steel and aluminum industry, the lumber industry that's been affected, they just got to step back and look at what's happened in the world in the last 5 weeks with the headlines of the war in Iran and what is driving the world economy. The world is not suffering because tanker ships loaded with blue jeans have been held up. The world's not suffering because tanker ships of pharmaceuticals have been held up. The world is hurting and inflation is rising because of oil. And the sooner that people in Ontario and Quebec that keep supporting the Liberals understand that oil is what drives our economy, the better off we're going to be.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Yep, good to hear from you for the first time. That's Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Very little consensus today on the job Mark Carney is doing as Prime Minister on the trade situation with the United States. What's your opinion? Let's go to Ken is up next in Calgary. Hello, Ken.
Yeah, hello, Rob. I'm going to agree with one of the earlier callers. I think Mark is doing a good job in that the best thing to do is ignore Trump. I mean, he's a little bit in mental decline, and he cares nothing about Canada. I don't think there's much he can do. And I don't think he's going to be around very long either. So I don't know how, or whether it's impeachment, but I think he'll be gone. But one idea I had is if you want to grab his attention, the Canadian government could make a donation of, say, $50 million to the Golden Ballroom. And Trump would grab that like a bone to a dog,
Right.
And, maybe he would engrave Mark Carney's name on one of the window panes or something like that.
Sure.
So that's my idea. Or maybe $25 million to the Golden Ballroom and $25 million to the Trump Arch that they're going to build in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, maybe. I think maybe the Trump administration might be happy if we bought some F-35 fighter jets or made some sort of commitment to the Golden Dome missile defense program or something like that.
No, I think for Trump, the Golden Ballroom would be the key. Way more than the F-35s.
I know you say, he's best to just be ignored. He might not be around much longer. After the midterms, he might be a lame duck anyway. But, I mean, the fact is, take, just Ontario, for example.
In 2 months.
I understand that. But is that what you tell, a steel worker or an auto worker in Ontario? We're just going to ignore it?
Yes, because you're not going to get anywhere. Really? And Mark is smart enough to realize that. After Mark was elected, he made the trip to the White House and paid homage to the president. And since then, Trump just brushed the whole country off and figures Canada's just a waste of time. And you're not going to change that. We're still selling aluminum and steel to most products of the States. Yeah, there's some losses. But if you want to grab his attention, forget about the F-35, but make a contribution to the Golden Ballroom. He'll jump right on that.
All right. Thank you, Ken. It's an interesting idea, sir. I appreciate the opinion. Let's go to David up next in Red Deer. Hello, David.
Hello.
Hi, David. What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion is I have friends in England that are in the international financial part of the world, and they were so happy that we took Carney off their hands, they couldn't believe it. But that's that opinion. But as far as what has Carney done in regards to the United States, the first time he went down there, he kind of rolled over and played dead and said, yeah, we'll forgive that $3 billion that we're going to charge you on the communication tax, I believe it was.
The digital services tax.
Yeah, right. I mean, to me, that was the best sign to Trump that we've got him in our hand and he'll do anything we ask him to. Now, the other parts is Carney giving money away like crazy to foreign companies. I mean, look what he did to Stellantis. Gave them a huge amount of money. Now, he says he's going to sue the government or Stellantis to get that money back. Where is that now? Is that anything happening there? We look at Ford Motor Company that he gave money to redo an assembly plant, and then they shut it down and moved the production to the United States, Ohio, I think it was. Algoma Steel, they knew that they were laying off a lot of people, and he still gave them $500 or $600 million to help, renew some of their equipment, which I can understand that point. But he acted like he didn't know this was happening until, I didn't realize you were going to do that. To me, Carney has done everything for rich companies that aren't even Canadian in many cases, and he's done nothing for Canada, really. Taking 10 cents tax off a liter of fuel, sure, it's 10 cents, but in reality, what has he really done for us? Not just lately, but ever. And I think really, like I say, he likes to go around and make these fancy speeches, but what's he doing at home? That's my opinion anyway.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing it. I mean, we had reciprocal counter tariffs put forward when the first tariffs were announced on the steel and aluminum industry. Not much to show for that. As the caller points out, we had planned to do a digital services tax. which was much criticized in some corners of Canada as being unnecessary, that we didn't need a digital services tax. The government defended us, saying it will promote Canadian content on the big streaming services. We have to go after big tech, Amazon, Apple, Meta, all of it. It's supposed to be a 3% tax on those big tech companies. We dropped that. And the finance minister at the time said, this will significantly advance our negotiations with the United States. 9 months later, that has yet to materialize. Your thoughts, please, on the Carney record on trade and dealing with Trump on trade. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
On Carney, Trump, and trade, let's get to Bob. Up next in Calgary on Talkback. Hello, Bob.
Hey, Rob. It's good to talk to you again. Listen, unfortunately, Mark has taken a page out of his predecessor and the playbook of the Liberals, which is roll over and play dead. And Mark has the ability with a lot of the products that Canada produces that the United States has to have, steel, aluminum, potash, that he could just simply say, okay, you want to play hardball, Mr. Trump? Let's play hardball, and we'll sell you our potash for 195% tariff. What would they think? What they could do? They couldn't do anything, and they would capitulate. So we have to.
So there are calls that are growing then for things like what you're proposing. Counter tariffs. Do you think we should bring those back? Or export taxes.
Do.
You do.
I absolutely do. Yeah, I think that when you're dealing with, it's a schoolyard thing. When you're dealing with a bully that comes up and pushes you, until you punch him back, you are going to get pummeled. And it's time that Mark, I'm sorry, take the suit off, put the boxing gloves back on, and punch back.
Punch back. Okay. You don't think he's taking a hard enough line with Trump?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Bob in Calgary. I don't know. Access to the U.S. market is vital for Canada's economic health. Yeah, it's good to have trade deals with other countries. Of course it is. But we'd be kidding ourselves to think we'd somehow be better off without the kind of access that the U.S. market offers us and enjoy the lifestyle that we enjoy now without it. You think about Ontario and how important trade with the United States is for Ontario. The best guess is that Ontario exports every year to the United States $250 billion worth of goods to the United States, just the United States. Of course, the single most important industry is the auto industry. And the Canadian auto industry is going through hard times right now. We've seen the big three make major announcements and investments in the United States. We haven't seen the same sort of announcements from those companies about major investments in Canada. In fact, it was in the news a few weeks ago. Some Chinese companies were sniffing around about empty auto plants in Ontario to put the finishing touches with the Allen keys on some of the EVs that are going to be for sale in this country. Alberta, obviously the most important industry in that province, is the oil and gas industry. $190 billion worth of energy exports going where? To the United States. Every year, 90% of all the energy exported from Alberta goes to the United States. And when Premier Danielle Smith goes to Mar-a-Lago and tries to pitch Alberta and Canada as part of North American energy security, North American energy dominance, she's labeled as a sellout by media personalities and liberal politicians in the East and on the West Coast. And then you have a province like tiny little Nova Scotia, barely more than 1 million people, provincial GDP, $51 billion, total exports to all countries, $7 billion a year, 70% of it goes to the United States, $4 to $5 billion a year. It's just so enormously important. It is so enormously important. Nothing even compares in terms of outside influence and importance. Need a deal. And the Prime Minister needs to get a deal, a good one, with the United States. The sooner the better. Thank you for all your calls today. Back tomorrow, brand new topic and more of your calls. Until then, the latest breaking news on News Radio.